You have probably typed something into response that felt almost human. Maybe it answered a question better than you expected. Maybe it wrote something that genuinely surprised you. Maybe it said something completely wrong but delivered it with total confidence. All of those things, the brilliance and the failures, come from the same underlying mechanism. And once you understand it, you will use AI completely differently. In the next 13 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how ChatGPT works. No maths, no computer science degree required. Just the real intuition, what is actually happening every time you hit send. Most explanations of how ChatGPT works fall into one of two traps. Either they are so simplified they are basically wrong. It is just autocomplete, or they go so deep into the technical detail you need a PhD to follow along. This is neither of those. We are going to cover 6 things: what ChatGPT actually is, how it learned to do what it does, the core mechanism behind every response, its biggest limitation, which is also the key to using it well, why it sometimes lies confidently, and how it was shaped to be helpful rather than harmful. By the end, you will have the mental model that most people, including many who work in tech, never fully develop. Let us start at the beginning. ChatGPT is a large language model, or LLM, that is the official term. But what does it actually mean? Think of it this way. Imagine a student who, from birth, did nothing but read every book ever written, every Wikipedia article, every news story, every forum post, every academic paper, every piece of code on the internet, trillions of words, more text than any human could read in 1,000 lifetimes. Now imagine that after absorbing all of that, you can ask this student any question, and they will answer from everything they have learned. That is essentially what a large language model is. It was trained on an enormous amount of text, and from that training, it developed a remarkable ability to understand and generate language. OpenAI used a large portion of the internet, digitized books, scientific papers, and other sources as training data. The model did not memorize all of this word for word. Instead, it learned the patterns, how words relate to each other, how ideas connect, how different types of questions tend to be answered. That is the first key insight. ChatGPT is not a database you are searching. It is a pattern recognition system that learned from human language at a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. So how exactly did it learn? This is where it gets interesting. Children do not learn language from a grammar textbook. They learn by hearing language used millions of times and gradually inferring the rules themselves. By 3 years old, a child has already absorbed the core grammar of their native language without ever being explicitly taught a rule. Large language models learn in a remarkably similar way. During training, the model was given enormous amounts of text with words randomly removed, and it had to predict what the missing words should be, over and over again, billions of times. Every time it got it right, it was reinforced. Every time it got it wrong, it was corrected. The result is a model with roughly 175 billion internal settings, called parameters or weights. Think of these as tiny dials. During training, every dial was adjusted, slightly up, slightly down, until the model became very good at predicting missing text. By the end of training, those 175 billion calibrated dials represent something extraordinary. A compressed understanding of human language, knowledge, and reasoning, extracted from everything humanity has ever written. That is the second key insight. ChatGPT did not have facts programmed into it. It discovered patterns in language that happened to encode enormous amounts of human knowledge. Now for the most important concept in this entire video, the mechanism that is actually running every time ChatGPT generates a response. It is called token prediction, and it is both simpler and more profound than most people expect. A token is roughly a word or part of a word. When you type a message into ChatGPT, your text is broken into tokens. The model then looks at all those tokens and asks, given everything I know, what is the single most likely next token? It generates one token. Then it looks at everything again, including the token it just generated, and asks, what is the most likely next token now? And again, one token at a time, building the response word by word. Here is the autocomplete analogy. When you are texting, your phone suggests the next word based on your typing habits. ChatGPT does the same thing, except instead of being trained on your messages, it was trained on all of human writing. And instead of 3 suggestions in a little bar, it generates hundreds of tokens in a row with remarkable coherence. You might wonder if it is just predicting the next word. How can it reason? How can it write a coherent essay or solve a difficult problem? The answer is that language and thought are more deeply connected than we usually appreciate. To predict the next token in a logical argument, the model has to represent the logic. To predict the next token in a story, it has to track the narrative. The prediction task forces the model to develop internal representations that look a lot like genuine understanding. That is the third and most important insight. ChatGPT generates text one token at a time by predicting what comes next. But doing this across trillions of training examples produces something that looks and feels like real intelligence. Here is something that surprises most people when they first hear it. ChatGPT has no memory between conversations. None. Zero. When you start a new chat, it does not remember anything from your previous sessions. Every new conversation is to ChatGPT the very first conversation. This is because of something called the context window. Think of it as ChatGPT's working memory. The text it can see at any one moment. Everything inside the current conversation is visible. Everything outside it is completely invisible. This has a few practical implications worth knowing. First, it is why you sometimes need to re-explain your situation even though you told ChatGPT before that was a different conversation. Second, very long conversations can degrade in quality. As the conversation grows, the earliest parts scroll out of the context window and the model starts to lose the thread. Third, and this is genuinely reassuring for many people, ChatGPT is not secretly accumulating a dossier on you across sessions. It only knows what is in the current conversation. The context window has been growing over time. GPT-4 can hold around 128,000 tokens, roughly a full novel saw in a single session. Claude's window is even larger at 200,000 tokens, but it is still finite, still a window, not a lifetime of memory. That is the fourth insight. ChatGPT's memory is limited to the current conversation. Understanding this makes you a noticeably more effective user. Now for the limitation that every ChatGPT user needs to understand, and that most people either do not know about or seriously underestimate. ChatGPT hallucinates. That is the technical term. It means the model confidently generates text that is factually wrong. Not wrong in an obvious way, wrong in a convincing, detailed, specific way. It might cite a research paper that does not exist, give you a statistic with a plausible sounding source, write a biography of a real person containing invented events, describe a historical development that never happened, fluently, confidently in perfect prose. Why does it do this? Remember, ChatGPT's mechanical goal is to generate the most likely next token. It is optimized for plausibility, not accuracy. When it does not know the answer to something, it does not say, "I do not know." It generates what a correct answer would probably look like, based on every pattern it has learned. Think of the student analogy again. You ask them a question they genuinely cannot answer. Instead of admitting ignorance, they make something up. Confidently, fluently, convincingly. It sounds right, it is not. This is one of the most important things to understand about AI. Fluency is not the same as accuracy. A wrong answer delivered with complete confidence is still wrong. What does this mean in practice? ChatGPT is an extraordinary tool for generating ideas, drafting content, explaining concepts, writing and debugging code, brainstorming, and thinking things through. But it is not a reliable source for specific facts, citations, statistics, legal advice, or medical information, not without independent verification. Use it as a brilliant thinking partner. Verify anything factual before you act on it. That is the fifth insight. ChatGPT is optimized to sound right, not to be right. Knowing this is the single most important piece of AI literacy anyone can have. If all ChatGPT did was predict the next token, it would not be the product you know. A model trained purely on raw internet text would be chaotic, generating misinformation, offensive content, and useless responses at the same rate as helpful ones, because that is simply what the internet contains. So OpenAI added a crucial second stage of training called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF. Here is how it works. After the initial training, human contractors, thousands of them, were shown pairs of model responses and asked to rate them. Which response was more helpful, more accurate, safer, better written? The model was then trained to generate the types of responses humans consistently rated more highly. This is essentially how you shape a personality. You reward the behaviors you want more of and correct the ones you do not. The result is ChatGPT as you experience it. A model that genuinely tries to be helpful, declines requests that could cause harm, acknowledges uncertainty rather than bluffing, and communicates in a measured and thoughtful way. It also explains why ChatGPT can occasionally feel overly cautious, refusing requests that seem entirely harmless. The human feedback process is imperfect, and sometimes the model learns to be more conservative than the situation actually requires. This human-in-the-loop stage is what separates a useful AI assistant from a raw language model. And it is an ongoing process. Models continue to be refined based on real-world usage. That is the sixth and final insight. ChatGPT's helpfulness and safety were deliberately trained into a true human feedback. They are design choices, not accident, and that process never really stops. Let us bring everything together. ChatGPT is a large language model trained on an almost incomprehensible volume of human text. It learned by predicting missing words, adjusting 175 billion internal parameters until it became remarkably good at that task. The core mechanism is token prediction. It builds responses one word at a time, each token chosen based on what is most likely to come next. It has no memory between conversations. Only what is inside the current context window is visible to it. It hallucinates, generates confident-sounding text that can be factually wrong because it is optimized for plausibility rather than accuracy. And it was shaped to be helpful and safe through RLHF, where thousands of human raters trained it toward better behavior over time. Understanding these 6 things does not just make you a more informed person. It makes you a better user. You will know when to trust it and when to verify. You will understand why it forgets. You will know why long conversations sometimes drift, and you will be able to get significantly more from it because you finally understand what it actually is. If this gave you a genuinely new understanding of what is happening under the hood, subscribe. I post explanations like this every week, always without the jargon. Next video, I'm going deep on large language models more broadly. What makes them different from all previous AI and where the whole field is heading. You will not want to miss that one. And leave a comment. What surprised you most from this video? What do you still want explained? I read everything and it directly shapes what I make next.